This is quite an innovative new podcast series for us. It's called Biased Justice. So, welcome to episode one. I got an email, it had to be at least 8 months ago. And I've been holding on to this manuscript for a while, but you'll hear why. So, I got this email from a man named Alex who is friends with someone who, in his friend's words, said he's wrongfully convicted and wrote this memoir from prison. And it's all about what happened and, in his terminology, the biased justice system. So, first of all, I want to say that, just for legality purposes, I'm neither, I'm not weighing in and giving an opinion about the conviction itself, and neither's Mary when she narrates the chapters. We are just giving voice to Dimitri Rozenman's memoir, which is Biased Justice, an astonishing true story of a wrongful conviction. So first I want to just thank Dimitri for trusting, myself, Mary, with your words. And we bonded over Oscar Wilde and classic literature. So I'm going to read the first chapter, and then Dimitri actually has some responses based on the first chapter. So every time there's a new chapter, you're also going to hear at the end of the episode a special segment where Dimitri is going to respond and pose just little more clarity. So if you have a question for Dimitri, please email me and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer it as you're listening. So it's kind of like, storytelling, a memoir in real time. It's not out there in print. So this audio version is the first time Dimitri's manuscript has life breathed into it. Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, the host of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, an arts and culture podcast. Thank you for listening. I want to just remind you all that if you're not following us on social media, please do. It's always nice to interact with you all, and I'm always posting clips from the podcast, information about our free book club that's on Zoom, and all other kinds of exciting events, and a lot of literary posts. So Instagram is at Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and so is our Facebook. We have a LinkedIn, a YouTube channel where you might be watching us now. So hi, there's a video episode on YouTube. And our TikTok is actually my name. It's at Dr. Rimby. And Patreon is where you can find all the just uncensored, no ad episodes. It's patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. There's usually some kind of deal going on, and you can try it out for a few days for free if you just want to see what gets posted there. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review. It means a lot. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure you're following us. And I hope you all just enjoy this episode. Chapter 1, Judgment Day. Our justice system makes two promises to our citizens: a fundamentally fair trial and an accurate result. If either of those two promises is not met, the criminal justice system itself falls into disrepute. Pascal Calagero, former Chief Justice, Louisiana's Supreme Court. According to the state of Arizona, I had asked my employee, a man named Levi Nahar, to find someone to kill my ex-wife, Yana, her younger sister, and both of her parents in order to avoid paying the $500,000 Yana had been awarded in the divorce decree. The state also alleged that I had vandalized Yana's and her parents' vehicles. I met Levi 2 years before my arrest. A FedEx driver, whose route included my cigar shop, told me his brother-in-law was a hard worker looking for a job. At the job interview, Levi looked scrungy. His pants didn't have a belt, his t-shirt was unfaded, and his face was at least 2 days unshaven. I wouldn't hire a person like that to stand behind the counter, but in one corner of my shop, I had a small area where there was a table for filling cigar orders from local golf courses and liquor stores. The only employee who did this job quit the day before, and Levi, being young, lean, and muscular, seemed to fit. At trial, Levi was the state's main witness. He testified that one late evening in October of 2008, at the time Yana and I were still going through divorce, he had witnessed me slashing the tires of her car, the tires of her mother's car, and then pouring sugar in the fuel tank of her father's truck. The plan to have Yana and her family killed supposedly began to take shape once the court issued a divorce decree 4 months later. The state's physical evidence consisted of two recordings of a single conversation I had with Levi, which he had recorded at the behest of the police. One recording was almost entirely inaudible. The other recording captured Levi twice saying he had two men ready to do the killings. Instead of my responses, however, there was only a low volume inaudible noise. Prosecutor Rebecca Pritchard, a tall and lanky lady with spiral curls, relied on the power of suggestion to persuade the jurors. She told them that although my first response was inaudible, if they listened carefully to my second response, they would hear me say, "I want Yana killed by Tuesday." My attorney, Ulysses Farragut, with his soft olive tan and impeccably combed salt and pepper hair, looked like he just walked off the cover of GQ magazine. He never bothered to investigate why my responses turned out to be inaudible. Instead, he argued that the words Pritchard contributed to me were simply not there. His defense centered on the fact that Levi was not a credible witness. In fact, a con man who attempted to collect from Yana $175,000. I first learned about the $175,000 when Farragut, carrying a laptop in hand, came to visit me in the jail. He told me that, according to a police report, Yana, shortly after my arrest, met with detectives Saul Ayala and Edward Warner and told them that Levi was demanding to get paid. "Let me show you something," Farragut said, opening his laptop and inserting a CD in its drive. Initially, the video was grainy, but then it showed Yana sitting in a small, windowless room across a metal table from the detectives, keeping her pink handbag on her lap and close to her chest. Ayala sat quietly about 2 feet away from the table, allowing Warner, who had a broad face and broad shoulders and was physically imposing, to take the lead and ask questions. "I heard a knock on the door," Yana began. "I thought it was my mother. When I came to the door, I saw it was Levi. So I had to get dressed. Do you know what I mean?" she asked, looking at Warner. "Yeah," he replied unenthusiastically. I walked outside and we sat on the bench and just kind of started talking. At first, Levi told me he was not supposed to be in Arizona and nobody was supposed to know about it. "Did he say why?" Warner asked. "No, but I thought it's part of the security while the investigation is going on. Do you know what I mean?" "Right." So we kind of talked. I mean, actually, most of the time. Most of the time, we actually talked about Dimitri being such a bad person. Uh-huh. And then the money part came up like toward the end because he was. "How long do you think the conversation was?" Warner interrupted. "From about 9:30 to 11 at night." Yana then described how close to 11 o'clock her mother came home, and instead of going inside the house, she was standing on the front porch listening to the conversation. At that point, Levi started talking about money. "What did Levi say about money in front of your mom?" Warner asked. "He said his dad, I believe, has a 175,000 debt." "So did he say his father was in debt $175,000? "Yes," Yana replied and continued. "I told him that he has to understand that I have no money right now, that I am left with nothing." "Right?" And his response was, "He said that he knows where I live and that eventually I will get the money. I told Levi that I appreciate what he has done for me, and if I have an opportunity to help him in the future, I will do so." "Sure, sure," Warner commented. "I told Levi that those 175,000 is not going to be a one-time payment. It's going to be over a period of time." Yana's stammering, her forestalling to pay the money, her referring to the money with a certain familiarity as "those." All of it suggested to me that Levi was there to collect $175,000 that was promised to him in the past, and that Yana needed the detective's help to get Levi off of her back. "Was it a gift?" Warner asked, seemingly trying to help Yana to find a way out. "No." "A loan?" Warner tried again. "No, I mean, the thing is, I thought I went smart about it because I told Levi that I will always help him. Yana halted, stared for a moment or two at Warner and Ayala, and then recounted the entire conversation with Levi from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Warner interspersed her story with more, right, and sure. He seemed to be avoiding asking questions that could compromise Yana's credibility at trial. After Farragut and I were done watching the video, he turned to me, opened his eyes wide, and said, based on my 10 years as a defense attorney, I've learned that truth is not always a winning strategy. Yana looks like a typical victim, frail and innocent. If I suggest that she had anything to do with your arrest, the jurors will not believe it. The best strategy is to say that Levi concocted this entire story on his own in order to ask Yana for a loan. The strategy contradicted the evidence, and I feared that the jurors wouldn't believe that Levi decided to go through all this trouble in order to ask Yana for a loan. But I was in uncharted waters and looked at Farragut as my buoy. Having hesitated a moment, I reluctantly agreed with this defense. Throughout the trial, I was in a mental fog. The possibility of a guilty verdict was so nerve-wracking that I had difficulty focusing on what was happening before my eyes. It was as if I was watching television with the volume set to barely audible. The trial was now over, and I found myself awaiting the verdict inside a 6 by 9 foot holding cell. Every minute crept by with a torturous slowness. To assuage my nerves, I paced between the walls covered in a cobweb of drawings. A narrow face of the devil with horns, a dagger piercing a heart, another dagger piercing a man in the eye. Welcome to America on a giant phallus that with its testicles looked like a cannon on wheels. And underneath all of that in clumsy letters and in a slanted hand, I will collect fines from everyone who defaced this wall, signed Sheriff Joe Arpaio. I must have covered 1,000 laps before I heard a mounting din of footsteps. 5 guards arrived dressed in khaki uniforms and stout boots, chest out, shoulders erect. One of them, slightly shorter than the rest and with a heavy smell of aftershave, engaged a key inside the lock and slid the door open. The verdict is in, he said dispassionately. Let's go. The guards took me down a silent maze of interconnecting corridors. 2 guards on each side, the guard with the heavy smell of aftershave leading the way. In one stretch, a light bulb had burned out, and we had to walk in total darkness, orienting our way by a light bulb ahead. Finally, we reached a door. The guard leading the way pushed it open, and I saw a courtroom full of people whose chatter at the sight of me suddenly hushed. Judge Christine Hoffman, who presided over my trial, sat on a dais looking like the Sphinx. Hair up to her shoulders, deep lines between cheeks and mouth, and lips compressed tightly. The jurors entered the room in a single file, made a turn at the corner of the desk where I stood next to Farragut, and avoiding my gaze, proceeded to seat themselves in the jury box. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Hoffman asked the foreman, who wore old-fashioned round glasses and had pale skin. Yes, Your Honor, he replied, and handed the verdict form to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. My heart began to pound as if I was facing a firing squad. I gripped Farragut's hand for support, but his hand felt limp. The judge read from the verdict form. As to count 1, we, the jury, find Dimitri Rozenman guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. As to count 2, we, the jury, find Dimitri Rozenman guilty of criminal damage. I was about to ask Farragut about the appeal, but the guards encircled me on all sides. One of them seized my arm above the elbow, jerked it as forcefully as the reins of a plow horse, and said through clenched teeth, "Let's go, man," before the door closed. I heard from the gallery my girlfriend, Victoria. "Don't worry," she shouted, "I'll get you out." The next morning in my cell, I heard a crackling sound from the intercom, followed by a voice. "Rozenman, go to the visitation room." The visitation room was down the corridor from the pod I was in. It was about the size of a classroom, painted in bright yellow, and had 3 rows of tables and worn-out chairs that were splintered around the edges. Against one wall, on an elevated platform, there was a table for a sheriff's deputy who kept a watchful eye on everyone. When I entered the room, it was buzzing with the voices of inmates and visitors. A handful of visitors were sitting all by themselves in expectation of the person they were about to see. After scanning their faces and not seeing anyone familiar, I sat behind an empty table to await my visitor. A poster on the wall to my right that I never seen there before depicted a kidney and said in bold letters, "Be a kidney donor." What a preposterous idea, I thought. At this point, there was no way to harvest my kidney unless I were to die. Under different circumstances, the idea of death would have no effect on me, but now it brought another layer of gloom. Just as I was musing about the poster, I caught sight of Victoria at the instant she pushed open the grimy metal door and entered the room. Her eyes seemed bleary and her hair was clamped in a bun instead of her usual braided semicircle. We met at a party for Ukrainian immigrants 6 months before my arrest. She struck me as beautiful, and I knew why. She had emerald green eyes, a lovely swerve of cheekbones that seemed to have been inherited from an Asian ancestor, a high forehead, and a fine, elongated, slightly uplifted Ukrainian nose that terminated in a nice little button. She was probably taken, I said to myself, but a friend of mine told me that Victoria was recently divorced and offered to introduce us. That evening, I learned that Victoria, just like myself, was from Kiev. I can't believe they found you guilty, she said, sitting down. And for a while, we talked about the trial and how the prosecutor misled the jury. You need to move on, I said, changing the subject. I don't want this conviction to destroy your life. Her eyes brimmed with tears and she began to cry. Don't you understand? She said. I love you. I'm like a swan. They stay paired for life. I will make an appointment with Farragut today to have him handle your appeal. You're innocent. You'll see. Your conviction will be overturned. And that's the end of chapter 1. So that's the first chapter of the Dimitri Rozenman story. And I'm joined here now for our post show talk. The first time we're getting to do a post show talk, really exciting. Mary from True Crime and Academia,
Hello.
and our intern, Sean Penta.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thank
really
you.
excited for you to
Woohoo.
be here. Well, and Mary DiPipi. But if you know the True Crime Show, you know her last name.
Yeah, I've been here a while. To quote Rachel Zoe,
Yeah,
I've been here before.
yeah,
So
she's been here. She's been here a long time, um, but not that long that we're that old. So yeah, this whole manuscript presented itself in a really interesting way to us. Like I got
Mhm.
an email, Dimitri, his friend Alex had reached out to me and said, you know, Dimitri really loves your true crime in academia series that Mary does. He likes your intellectual conversations and he really trusts you to do justice to his manuscripts, bias justice. Pun unintended there. But and we were so thankful, right, Mary? Like I
Yeah.
remember when we met and we were like, okay, how can we make this something on the podcast?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's such an honor and also such a huge responsibility to this undertaking of, telling someone else's story. I mean, and also we're just so lucky to be in that position that we can do this. Um, but also to kind of just get also another peek behind the curtain, I guess, from more of a true crime angle of what kind of like the flaws of our justice system and things like that. So, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, we're kind of unbiased or trying to remain as unbiased as possible, but you know, the facts are facts and there are obviously flaws in our justice system. So, you know,
Yeah, this wouldn't be the first time that someone would be wrongfully convicted.
correct.
Um, and, you know, to let just Dimitri's words speak for themselves, it's up to all of you listening. You know, I always say to my students about the power of rhetoric. Like, has the author appealed to credibility? Have they provided the facts, right? Like, that's for all of you to decide. I
Mhm.
mean, I think Dimitri does an incredible job highlighting his narrative, incredibly compelled by his references to literature, his college education. He gets more into that as the chapters go. So I did the first chapter, Mary does the second chapter, and we're going to go back and forth. Maybe Sean will do a chapter, you know, we'll get him to do a little something of a reading. But what we decided to do was have Dimitri respond to specific questions. So what we're going to do is have you all listen to his response. So the way that he is able to respond, and this happened when I met with him the first time on Zoom, is he can only be on a call for 15 minutes. So like if you hear there's I think an automated message that comes up, that's because he has to like get off and get back on. So here is Dimitri's response about whether or not, you know, his lawyer looked at this manuscript.
After my first conviction was overturned, while I was awaiting to be retried, in short order, I hired 4 lawyers. 3 of these lawyers took my money, and I've never seen them again. And the last lawyer proved to be inept. The upside of this is that if these lawyers had been any better, I probably wouldn't have written this manuscript, and you and I probably wouldn't be talking right now. By the time I was done with my last lawyer, I was out of money. My only options at this point were either to ask the court to appoint a public defender or to take my defense into my hands. In jail, I heard repeatedly how public defenders were so overburdened with cases that on the day of the trial, they showed up barely prepared. It seemed I was better off representing myself. So to answer your question, my lawyer hasn't read the manuscript because I don't have a lawyer. However, from what I've seen and observed, shedding light on a wrongful conviction through a podcast or any other media oftentimes leads to a retrial or outright exoneration. And since I'm innocent of this crime, inside of me, there is a burning desire to share my story with anyone who will listen. I also would like to add that in my manuscript, I'm not questioning why the jurors arrived at the conclusion that they did, given the information that they were given. What I'm questioning is the validity of the system that was used to convict me. You see, I was convicted at a trial where the police misled the jurors on precisely the one single issue that the trial judge himself determined was of critical importance. So my real grievance is not with the jurors, but rather with the defective system that was used to convict me and that allowed my conviction to stand.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed-sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Now that the spring semester is here, I am so excited to let you all know about a publisher, an independent publisher that's celebrating 40 years of great books called Broadview Press. I love Broadview Press. I have so many of their editions of classic literature like Wuthering Heights, which is coming out soon, and it's our book club choice. And they have so many academic books for instructors and for students and the general public. So I've had so many exciting guests on, from guests talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, guests talking about vampire literature, horror literature. I'm looking at you, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, whose book actually just came out called Horror Theory. Look it up. And I cannot wait because I have 2 exciting guests coming on soon. And I've recorded their episodes, so I know that it's going to be such an interesting conversation. The first is Rachel Tucholsky, who wrote a book called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college. I've used excerpts of it for my Writing 2 course at Montclair. It has gone over so well. I just love what Rachel does, and we get into this in our episode about this metaphor about writing on fire, like how that's a great way to think about free-flowing, brainstorming, creative ideas, and getting into that flow state, which, as Rachel explains, happens not just in writing, but in many other avenues. And then the other guest that I have on is David Starkey, who wrote a book called Academic Writing Now, A Brief Guide for Busy Students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student-friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay and is capable of being read in a single sitting, which, for a generation, myself included, I think all of us now, just consumed by digital media or just this attention grabbing technology, reading in a single sitting is definitely a plus. So head to Broadview Press, use the promo code Ivory Tower, and you'll get 20% off every single book in their collection. There's also a really cool digital library collection they have. So if you're a librarian, take a look at that. Message me. If you're a librarian, I'd be happy to show you what that new collection looks like. And I hope you all enjoy your reading. It may be freezing here in the Northeast, but when I received my copy of the Gay and Lesbian Review, it warmed me up instantly. Their new issue is all about kink culture. Let me explain a little. I'm going to read what Jeremy C. Fox, the managing editor, has to say about this issue. He says, this issue marks a bit of a departure for the Gay and Lesbian Review as we crack open the bedroom door to explore the practices and paraphilias that interest or obsess some LGBT people and the roots of their appeal. Several future articles delve deeply into why certain kinks turn some of us on, and whether we can discern historical and aesthetic rationales behind these fixations. This magazine features articles such as The Power of the Foot. Oh yeah, they're going there with foot kinks. Maplethorpe's Gift to America, Reclaiming the Sacred Dungeon. Tumblr was a gateway to kink, and Cruising with Boyd McDonnell. You definitely want to get your hands on the kink issue here. I have an exclusive promo code that those at the Gay and Lesbian Review have granted to you all. It is ITBR Choice. Enter it when you check out on the glreview.org, and you will get a free issue of the magazine. I hope you all enjoy your reading, and it'll definitely keep you nice and cozy. Okay. So, wow.
Takes a lot of guts to represent yourself. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Well, and I saw Mary's response to the whole public defender situation. This seems like something you've heard before, Mary.
Yeah, it's such a common thing that is just kind of known in the true crime world. I mean, it's depicted in almost every crime procedural ad nauseum. Like whenever there is a public defender called, it's almost like clockwork. It's a dude who's in a suit that doesn't really fit him. He's got 3 different suitcases. Half of them are spilling over with files, and he's like, gets your name wrong the first time because he's just overloaded and has no idea, literally probably has no idea where he is almost. So, or she, sorry, not to gender type, but yeah, so I mean this is a very common thing, and unfortunately, crime pays the government. It doesn't pay anyone else. Because when you think, and the lawyers, of course, but like when you think about all of the money and the people involved who are being paid to provide these quote unquote services of justice, that's a lot of money. Judges generally make a lot of money. Prosecutors make a lot of money. However, why is it that all of the resources for people who don't have money always underfunded? Like your public defender's office. Now, again, if you're in lower poverty and can't afford your own lawyer, that is your only option, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's built-in classism.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not designed to help people who are innocent. It's designed to help people who have money.
Yeah. And it seems like the reason this public defender got installed in the first place is because Dimitri gave all this money to these other lawyers who then took the money and then almost, it sounds like Ponzi scheme-ish. Like they
Yeah.
took the money and then bailed.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a crime, first of all, for lawyers to bail on their client. Well, were they lawyers in the first place would be, obviously it seems
That'd be a
like
good
they weren't
question.
reputable lawyers. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing that made my blood boil, just to hear that, here is someone who is trying desperately to defend themselves and has some resources to put towards it, and to just have them be totally squandered by people who just want to take advantage is absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mary, how about our second question we asked him?
Oh, yes. So our second question, excuse me.
That's okay.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So our second question that we asked him was, what in his background inspired him to become a writer and write his story in this way?
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's one thing to tell your story in an verbal way. It's another thing to create a cohesive narrative.
Yeah.
Okay. So here he is.
When I was growing up in Kyiv, Ukraine, in our home, we had this area that my parents referred to as the library. In reality, this was just two shelves rubbed against the wall that were top to bottom with books, many of which were classics. So for me as a teenager, there were plenty of books to read. I remember that in the evening hours, after I was done with my homework, I would often find myself reading a book. Actually, the main reason why I came to the United States had to do with a book by Jack London, where he described adventures of gold prospectors in Alaska. The man in the story struck me as being free-spirited and entrepreneurial. And I formed this impression that these traits were part of the nation's character. Since I thought I had an entrepreneurial streak of my own, I decided that I wanted to live in the United States among similar-minded people. When I was convicted for allegedly conspiring to kill my ex-wife, after all my appeals had been denied, I was lost for days and weeks, not knowing what to do next. My life as I knew it seemed to be over. But little by little, I realized that I had to give some meaning to this experience. Around this time, I came across this great story about how a written word could lead to justice and freedom. Perhaps you heard the story yourself. It goes like this. In 1896, Alfred Dreyfus, a captain in the French army, was falsely accused of espionage, and after a botched trial, was condemned to imprisonment on Devil's Island off the coast of South America. Hearing about this injustice, writer Émile Zola published an article about this case. He titled it The Accused, where he accused the courts of malfeasance. The article had such a profound effect that Dreyfus's sentence was commuted, and then, 2 years later, the court's verdict was overturned. I felt inspired by the story, and it set me on the path to begin writing a book about my case. The problem was that despite being an avid reader, I didn't know how to write. I didn't know how to convert my thoughts into sentences that grasped the reader's attention. When I first gave my writing a try, my sentences sounded boring and were full of cliches. Fortunately, the prison where I was confined offered a creative writing class that was taught by a professional writer. I signed up for the class, and this is where I learned why writing has to be fluid and at the same time full of tension. I also learned how to construct metaphors and the importance of revision.
The caller has.
That's so interesting.
That's just, I mean, I love the imagery of the bookshelf. And like when he had kind of like, I'd started to piece together hearing him, like when he's talking about the library, my brain was like, oh, this is probably a personal, home library, just a collection of books that his parents had. And, I think that's, it's one of those things that like it just connects you. And I think people don't realize how much storytelling and the written word is still so impactful to people today. Like it isn't just words on a page, that you just pick up and read. It's memories like this. It's, the way the story makes you feel and things like that. And, I also appreciate the fact that he mentioned his own writing experience and was like, I never knew how to do this, and I didn't really figure out how to really do this and execute it the way it should be, or the way that I would want it to be, without having gone to this class.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that even in the dire situation of being in prison, you can still learn the act of writing by, well, if you decide to take these classes, right? I don't think it's required to take creative writing. That's his passion, is to become even more educated.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for any like humble beginning kind of personal story like that. Even like the context of what we're talking about, even though it's obviously admittedly very heavy and real, it is still really cool that we have like this sort of human connection to him because we get to hear back to his roots and how it connects to him now. So I thought that was super cool.
Absolutely. Okay, well, the third question we asked him is, what do you want people to take away from your story? Not just about you, but about the system that convicted you. Okay.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Delmar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA+ people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
Welcome to Severed, a podcast week dropping new episodes every Monday. Severed True Crime and Severed Paranormal episodes deep dive into murder, mysteries, and the otherworldly in a concise format. A 7-minute story to frame the case with thoughtful analysis and our usual banter.
We sometimes find the lighter side of darker cases. We offer 3 spin-off shows, Severed Strange Stories, Severed Haunted You, and Severed Serial Killers that highlight the unusual to lighthearted topics from the digital dumpsters of true crime, haunted universities, and the minds of madness like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
We are your co-hosts. I'm Harry Chambers.
And I'm Drew Hudson. Listen on all major podcast platforms, including Rogue Media Network and Radio Garden State. Follow us on Instagram at severed_podcast.
The takeaway I want from my story is that we have a system of justice that is not sustainable because it does not adequately separate the innocent from guilty. One problem is that in our system, the prosecutor is in charge of disclosing evidence. It seems contrary to human nature that a prosecutor, whose job is to convict the defendant, is tasked with disclosing evidence that could hurt his or her case. While working on my manuscript, I found that there is a simple solution to this problem. In the countries of the Netherlands, Germany, and Norway, all evidence is collected by a magistrate judge who then discloses it to the defense and then the prosecutor. This takes away from a prosecutor an opportunity to suppress evidence that could benefit the defense. The other problem is that in our criminal justice, police perceive themselves as part of the state. At trials, the lead detective usually sits next to the prosecutor and advises the prosecutor on different aspects of the case. Inside and outside the courtroom, the police work closely with the prosecutor and in the process form a common interest in seeing the defendant convicted. In the countries of the Netherlands, Germany, and Norway, the role of police is strictly investigative. If defense attorney has a question or two for police, he or she does not need to go through a prosecutor. In these countries, the defense attorney can pick up the phone and speak with the police directly. Because the police in these countries don't have an interest to see the defendant convicted, they're less likely to conduct skewed or one-sided interviews, less likely to suppress exculpatory evidence, and less likely to lie on their oath. So in my manuscript, while describing my own experience with criminal justice, I also argue for a system of justice that is similar to the system in the Netherlands, Germany, and Norway. I think we can eliminate almost all wrongful convictions by adopting a system modeled on the system in these countries.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's so right. And I think it's one of the things that even I myself was thinking, like, how did I even kind of overlook that? You know, we trust the state and the prosecution, the law enforcement system. We trust it to be unbiased, but it's not. You have the prosecution who's presenting the evidence that they're getting from police. And it's if you're all on the same side for this one person and it's not them, how can you reframe and explain otherwise? Because if the system's not biased and it's all interconnected, how does that benefit the innocent?
Literally, like there's still people in prison for pot charges in the 90s. It's like what like if that isn't proof enough that like the country needs crime, because he was talking about the Nordic countries, he was talking about Norway, how they eliminate wrongful convictions. We need them, or at least our justice system does.
Yeah. Well, then we wouldn't have the criminal the industrial complex.
There you go.
Which, look into that, everyone out there, because it funds,
modern day slavery.
Yeah,
literally.
Basically like indentured servitude. Okay. And then our last question, Sean, do you want to read the last one?
Absolutely. We asked him in this first episode, what does it mean for you to have a podcast audience hear your story?
Okay, here we go.
We're living in an advanced democracy where most citizens want to send the things to a fair trial. However, as I discussed in my manuscript, once a defendant is convicted, it becomes next to impossible to overturn his conviction, even when the state suppressed evidence of innocence that jurors didn't know about. Our system of justice is flawed on many levels. As a result, tens of thousands of people are confined in prisons for crimes they didn't commit. I'm not making some novel claim here. I'm just adding my voice to that of numerous of others. So sharing my story is an opportunity to seek and change. On the personal level, sharing my story is a sort of freedom. Despite being confined, my voice can escape and reach others. Through the grapevine, it might even reach my daughters who, I presume, have been told the worst about me. As anything else in life, nothing is guaranteed. But sharing my story is an opportunity that might help the effort to reform our system of justice. It might even connect me with my daughters and lead to having my conviction overturned. So once again, I want to thank my hosts, Andrew and Mary, for allowing my voice to be heard.
Well,
The caller has hung up.
I
It's
mean,
poetic. I
oh,
think.
very. He has such a way with words.
He really does. I mean, and again, just to emphasize how great of an honor and also responsibility that we see it as. Like, again, we know this is not something we're taking lightly. This is something, we want to tread with the utmost respect.
Oh yeah. We've had many meetings, many conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah, we haven't rushed this at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And thank you, Dimitri, for responding to those questions. We'll be back with chapter 2, read by Mary, and then we'll be back in our little post-show talk. And we'll have a few more questions to ask Dimitri based on each chapter. And thank you, Sean, for joining Mary.
Thank
and I.
you.
We're so happy to have you here. Until next time, follow Mary, True Crime in Academia, Ivory Tower Boiler Room. We'll see you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.